Check, check, mic check. Check, check, mic check. Welcome to Podcast Envy. I'm your podcast boss, Andrea Klender, and today we are trying something new. Podcast Envy office hours shared with you on the Podcast Envy podcast featuring you. Well, maybe not you today, but maybe you on a future episode. Here's how it works. Go to thecreativeimpastor.com/office hours right now. Not if you're driving. Fill out a short questionnaire about your show or the show you're dreaming of creating and share what your biggest challenge, obstacle, or question is right now. If I think I can help you, I will invite you to record with me for an episode of Podcast Envy Office Hours, and the best part is it's totally free. No, wait. The best part is that other people are going to hear us talk through your challenge, find solutions together, and learn. Don't be shy. You can be at any stage in your podcast planning, production, and evolution, and your question could be as basic or complex as it needs to be. I'm ready for you. In the meantime, for your ears only, I'm letting you listen in on my recent office hours session with copywriter, entrepreneur, and self-proclaimed word nerd Kristen Channel. Okay, that sounds super boring. You cannot use lame copy like that to introduce a creative copywriter. So let me try again. Kristen Channel is a little bit writing instructor, a little bit librarian, a lot sweet and salty BFF who will laugh with you over gin and tonics on the patio. That was from her About page on her website. Yeah, much better. Kristen is also a soon-to-be podcaster who has a question around audience size for a new podcaster, and we'll get to that in a moment. First, let me share how she and I met. Well, officially, it was during this session, but online, it's via a network called Pause on the Play, facilitated by former guests of The Creative Imposter, Erica Corday and India Jackson, who are also podcasters. See, podcasting is contagious in the best way possible. Pause on the Play is a group full of dynamic entrepreneurial creators who have an aligned value of building in more diversity, equity, and inclusion to our businesses, our work, our branding, our platforms, etc. And so as a part of our office hours conversation, Kristen and I traveled a little bit in that direction. It was really more like a rant on my part, but in the interest of keeping things concise, I did clip that section out of the official episode you're about to hear. However, good news is you can still listen in over on Craft and Culture, my secret podcast feed that you can get when you join the membership for just $5 per month via Patreon. To learn more about Craft and Culture, subscribe, and get that chunk of our conversation, visit thecreativeimpastor.com/craft and culture. Linked in the show notes for this episode at thecreativeimpastor.com/podenvy071. All right. Now I want to introduce you to Kristen Channel of Channel Creative. Kristen Channel, thank you so much for joining me for Podcast Envy Office Hours.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, me too. This is our inaugural live, well, sort of live, recorded potential for broadcast office hours. And so I really appreciate you trusting me to come on this adventure. Tell me a little bit about who you are and what you do in a nutshell.
Okay. I am a word nerd. I recently graduated from the writing program at the University of Iowa. And in addition to writing nonfiction, which is my favorite, I also like to edit nonfiction books and fiction books. And mostly right now I do website copywriting and content creation, social media content. I like to work with women who I find that I attract a lot of people who have multiple brands under their belt. So multiple voices to work with.
You have an idea for a podcast, which is why you're here. Before I ask you what that idea is or to tell me more about the concept, what I would love to know is why is it that you're interested in or curious about podcasting? What is attracting you to it as a platform?
I love listening to podcasts. I was showing my husband all the shows I follow last night, and he was laughing because there are like 75 of them, just all different subjects. It goes back to my loving nonfiction. I love the storytelling aspect. I love the journalism, science, all of it. The reason I'm attracted to it is because I feel like I've finally gotten comfortable enough with my voice that I'm ready to start speaking. And I think podcasting is a good fit for me because I can go back and edit. It's fun. Like I like listening to them also. So
yeah. And when you say getting comfortable with your voice, do you mean the actual physical sound of your voice, or do you mean your voice as a content creator, or both?
As a content creator, mostly. I don't know how my voice comes across to other people. I try not to worry about it too much. But I've always been terrified of like public speaking and all that. So many people are. I feel like I'm coming out of that. And so I would like to venture into this because of that.
Well, hey, Podcast Envy listener, I'm going to be popping in here every so often to add a little bit more insight into the context of our conversation. I'm super glad Kristen mentioned that because becoming a better public speaker is more important now than ever. When building a business and a brand is so much about that know, like, and trust factor. And we have so many avenues of technology with which to connect with our audience and our community in such a way that it does build that trusting relationship with them. Seth Godin calls this new wave the connection economy, and becoming more confident at presenting your message. And even before that, figuring out and distilling what your actual message, brand values, and position are, what that change is that you want to make in your world for your audience and for your listeners and for your clients and for your followers is so key. And that is one of the hidden, secret, very viable reasons for starting a podcast in the first place, to give you a forum and a mechanism and a practice by which you get clearer and more confident in your message, in your voice, and in how you share and communicate that with the world. You told me ahead of time you have a few different names that you're playing around with. And the thread that I see through the different names that you're thinking of is it has to do with curiosity. And it also ties back to what you were saying about the fact that you tend to work with women who have multiple brands or multiple creative outlets or multiple different directions. And so that probably also describes you as well, I'm guessing.
Yes. I spent, I don't know, well into my 30s, from age 10 into my 30s, feeling totally lost about what I want to be when I grow up. That question always gave me so much anxiety because I have so many interests, as you could hear from my podcast list. And like a lot of things I learn really quickly. There are a lot of things that I just grasp really quickly and in a lot of different subjects. So it's really difficult when you go to university, when you have that sort of mind, to narrow down what you want to specialize in, because we're taught that we need to specialize. So I was really excited to find this concept of multipotentialite, which is people like that. They're also known as polymath or Renaissance man, Renaissance person, scanner. And there are these websites and these books that I just found where they teach people how to take their multiple interests, like their biggest ones, and bring it together into their own career, which is sort of what I'm doing myself. Mm-hmm. And I would like to, I guess, speak to people who also feel lost in that arena. You know, it's a big world. We want to see all of it and do all the things. And you don't have to specialize in just one thing like we're encouraged to do.
Are you thinking of it primarily as an interview-based show right now?
There would definitely be lots of interviews. But yeah, I'm also willing to do a few solo shows. I think I would have to starting out, right? Probably.
Yeah. Maybe yes, maybe no.
I mean, yeah, a little of both, I think.
Yeah. And what you just said is that you want to talk with people who are a little bit lost on that path. So maybe they've started down that path of, I have all these interests, I have all these ideas. I'm motivated to pursue them, but I don't know sort of how to corral them. So are you thinking that the people that you would have on the show would be at that stage, or the show would be for people who are at that stage, and then the people that you would have on would be people who are a little bit further down on that path of corralling all those interests and putting them together into a cohesive structure?
Yeah, I think the people who feel lost and confused and overwhelmed, that would be my audience. And then I would have people on the show who are further down that path.
Do you envision the show being part of your overall brand business strategy? Is it related to your professional services that you're offering? How do you see that relationship? Okay, the reason I asked about this is because it is very common for someone to start a podcast and feel like or want it to or think it has nothing to do with their business or their brand, when in fact it actually might very easily and in a very lovely way tie into what it is that they are trying to do through their existing business. And when the show starts out separate from the business, they very often naturally converge at some point anyway. And since Kristen is actively building her brand following right now, especially on new platforms, it can be a lot to try to build two separate audiences at the same time. So why not build one audience through both avenues?
It is connected. I mean, because they are connected areas, there's some overlap there, but I'm not specifically doing it to get business. It's more an interest of mine, I guess.
Would you tie it into the social media channels that you're currently already building for your brand and business? Or would you be creating separate social media channels specifically for the show? Or have you not thought that
I
far
haven't
yet?
even thought that yet.
Okay, truth be told, there's no right or wrong answer to this question. There are pros and cons to each approach. And when you said that why you wanted to do this is because you're a podcast lover, you love listening to them, you love the storytelling aspect, you love following your different passions and your curiosity and playing with language and words as well, which you can definitely do as a podcaster, especially if you're going to be pursuing some solo episodes and not just interviews. That's really an opportunity for somebody who is a writer to get really creative with how they present their solo content. When I started podcasting, I did not have any intention of doing solo episodes. I thought I would do all interviews, partly because I was like, who is going to want to listen to me? And I was imagining I would talk for like 15 minutes. And then I noticed when I started actually doing solos, I can't talk for less than 20 minutes about a topic.
I'm having similar feelings. Yeah. I'm like, is anybody going to want to listen to me beyond like 10 or 15 minutes?
Yeah. But you do have the opportunity. It really can help you develop languaging, what you were talking about with your voice and your brand voice and being comfortable presenting your ideas in a way that is unique to you and specific to you. It actually, for some types of communicators, if we're used to doing a lot of written content like social media content, blogs, nonfiction writing, having a spoken form of content is really interesting because I think it shifts the way that you communicate your messages, unless you're writing it all out first and reading it verbatim, which I don't necessarily recommend.
No, you can tell when people are doing that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very different. I had somebody tell me once, you need to learn to speak the way you write. And I'm like, that's probably not going to happen at all. So yeah, it is very different.
Your biggest question that you had for me that you really wanted to address on today's call, do you think that you could paraphrase that question or ask it in a new way for the listeners to hear?
Yeah. So this copywriting and editing business that I started, it's less than a year old. It's doing well, but I don't have a huge social media following. I have friends and I have a few business networking type friends. but not a huge following, less than 100 people. How big an audience do you need to hit the ground running? And do I need to build that up more before I get started?
The moment you've all been waiting for, the answer to Kristen's question is coming up next. But first, a word from today's podcast angel, who happens to be me. Or more accurately, the Creative Imposter Studios. These office hours episodes offer a sneak peek behind the scenes of what it can be like to work with a podcast coach or consultant, particularly your podcast boss, especially if you never have before. This is a key point of differentiation for my business when you hire the Creative Imposter Studios for your launch and your ongoing production and editing needs. We are not just covering the nuts and bolts basics to get your show online and sounding good. We are drawing from over 5 years experience, hundreds of episodes produced for over a dozen clients in an array of niches and industries with different styles and approaches. We are partnering with you on the success, however you choose to define it, of your show. You can learn more about our services at thecreativeimposter.com, linked in the show notes for this episode in your listening app. And if you're still squarely in DIY mode, but could use a little extra support or insight, check out Craft and Culture. It's at thecreativeimposter.com/craft and culture. And it is our little corner of a membership site called Patreon, where for just $5 per month, you can get access to more of my brain, behind the scenes, and podcasting how-tos on our secret podcast feed. You can even ask your podcasting questions as you go along, and I will answer them on an episode in that feed. Truly, it's like a mini version of Office Hours. From this particular episode on Craft and Culture, you will hear 2 rabbit hole outtakes. One is my story of frustration around finding diverse and inclusive representation of travel podcasters and influencers in Apple Podcasts and Instagram. And one is about some of the lesser known tools for social media provided with your Libsyn hosting account. By the way, if you haven't launched yet, check out Libsyn's hosting services. They're the best. And use promo code ENVY to get your first month free when you're ready to launch. Linked once again in the show notes. And now let's answer Kristen's big question.
How big an audience do you need to hit the ground running? And do I need to build that up more before I get started?
And what are the social media channels that you're using right now that you are really enjoying or that feel like they're starting to build momentum and working well for you?
Instagram is probably the best one right now. Facebook, I just don't put any effort into Facebook really. LinkedIn doesn't feel, and I'm just not as well versed in that.
And then in terms of non-social media channels that you mentioned networking events and some business things, what are you doing there to sort of expand your network and grow in that channel?
I do have some local in-person, when it's safe, some fairly large local networking events and groups. And then I've got some online with people, abroad and throughout the United States.
Okay. You are starting to build this brand related to your business. You have right now your primary, and you have your website as well.
Correct.
The short answer to your question is yes, you should build up a big audience before you launch. And no, you don't need to build up a big audience before your launch. It's both.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course. Okay.
Fortunately or unfortunately. And it depends on what your goals are for outcomes with your podcast. If, for example, you had told me, I need to use this as a tool to market my business to generate new leads, and I need it to be generating new leads within X amount of months, then yes, you would need to go into strong following building mode ASAP and really put a lot of effort into list building, into growing those social media profiles, et cetera. Because I feel like this is more of a passion project for you that is something that will be creatively fulfilling and that will help you to further develop that brand voice that you've been creating, then I would say you can get started on your show and your content ASAP and use the content that you're creating to help grow that following and that audience. You would be doing both simultaneously. Sometimes people will get advice or hear advice online for podcasting, which is like, you need to reach for this many downloads. Or if you join any podcasting groups online, like I don't know if you've looked into any Facebook groups or anything like that for podcasting. The thing that makes me insane is that people will post, oh, I just launched my show 3 days ago and I already have 5,000 downloads. Is that good? And I'm like, why? I don't really understand like why people are posting that. And I know like maybe they're just looking for some kind of validation. But when that person posts that they got 5,000 downloads in 3 days of launching, it's going to make other people feel bad who didn't get that. Also, asking if that's good is a pointless question because based on what? What are those 5,000 downloads doing for you? Are those 5,000 downloads of your exact perfect dream audience who are going to subscribe to your show and hang out with you on social media and possibly become clients or become guests? Are they going to become fans? What is the purpose of your show? Like that, it's not really a good metric. And so I think the problem is that a lot of people see things like that and they feel like they need to have this certain quotient or these certain numbers in order for their show to be quote unquote successful. And I've been really trying to work with people to shift that perspective that downloads and numbers in podcasting are really not everything. And it's hard because that's the easiest thing to measure. Audience size is the easiest thing to measure. How many followers you have, easiest thing to measure, but maybe not the most meaningful metric unless you are specifically trying to get sponsors for your show who only care about that number, in which case those are short-sighted sponsors. What I think is more important is when you start creating this content, yes, you want to send it out to the followers that you do have. And yes, it may be a slow build, but in general, unless you're a celebrity, podcasting is a long tail strategy anyways. It's a slow build anyways. Most podcasters, not all, but most, aren't going to see very much traction with their show for like a year.
Okay.
And when I say that, a lot of people are like, ooh, a year, you know, like that feels like a big commitment. Well, I didn't say no traction. I just said that you have to put that commitment in, especially when you don't have, I'm going to guess you're probably not sitting on piles of cash that you're going to throw into social media ads and marketing and things like that.
None of that.
You're probably not going to be starting out on like a big network that's going to throw tons of cash behind you. And you're not a self-made celebrity at this moment in time. So it's going to take time to build that up. But what's cool about starting your show is that it'll give you a reason to engage with your audience on social, and it'll give you more content that you can repurpose if you have a strategy about that going in. One of the other mistakes that people do is they create their show and then they just put one social media post. And I will say that this is what I did for a very long time. Half the time I would forget to even post my episode on social media when I first got started. But they'll just post and they'll be like, hey, there's a new episode. That's not actually enticing very many people to listen to your show.
Right.
And so I'd be curious for you, what would be fun and enjoyable that would feel like a creative outlet for you in terms of once you have the episode created, what would be 3 to 5 fun ways that you could use that interview or that episode to help build the brand with the social media channels that you're already using?
Oh my gosh.
So I did scroll through your Instagram account and see what all you've been posting. I noticed that you've been doing some video speaking directly to your followers. I noticed that you have some, I'm going to call them anti-quotes because I saw that one of your brand positions is that you're against the inspirational quotes from mostly dead white men who were probably, what did you say? Who are probably like jerks in real life
Yeah,
or
they were
something.
assholes. Yeah, that is correct. Well, you can put audio on Instagram now, right? I'm not real tech savvy. So yeah, I think I've seen you and others do that.
Do you like doing the visual, like
Yeah.
graphic posts?
I do. So yeah, some quotes that way, like instead
yeah.
of dead white men. Yeah. Okay. A newsletter with a clip or something on my blog. I would be transcribing it and putting show notes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would look at some of the other shows that you love, and you might need to do a little bit of research on this of shows that cater to a similar audience. So cater to those creative women who have multiple interests and are probably on the entrepreneurial side and are trying to put those things all together. Look at podcasts that are probably catering towards that audience. Quick note, I am definitely not saying that Instagram is the best nor the only place to grow an audience for your podcast. Typically, the best place to start is wherever your people already are or where you like to be the most. If you actively dislike using Instagram, it's probably not the best place to try to grow your following. I decided to start here with Kristen because it's a space that she's already playing in. But for example, I have clients who don't even have Instagram accounts, nor do any of their guests or listeners actively use Instagram for business. And it makes a lot more sense for us to explore, research, and grow on LinkedIn. And for some people, social media isn't it at all. And we need to look at other things like email lists, newsletters, professional organizations, in-person events. Remember those? So I am not here to give you a one-size-fits-all cookie-cutter strategy to skyrocket you to podcasting success because it doesn't exist. There is a custom solution and strategy that is right for you, your show, and your audience. And my job is to partner with you to help you find it, nurture it, explore it, experiment with it, assess it, and then decide what happens next. What I have found interesting for doing podcast research is actually using Instagram and searching by hashtag. If you can find a few people's accounts who you do like, look at the hashtags that they're using on their posts and click those hashtags and see what else comes up. Okay, this brings up something that I found very interesting and very annoying and frustrating, which was that recently I was trying to find people who I did not already know, people who were not already part of my network, to be part of my series on travel for the creative imposter and on travel and podcasting for Podcast Envy. Those episodes will be coming up soon. But as previously mentioned, we're also currently working on having more diverse representation in our guest lists. And just simply doing a little bit of research on Instagram for travel blogger, travel podcaster, travel influencer, I think you can probably guess whose accounts were coming up. And so I had to get a little bit more specific with my hashtags. And then I had to find the type of people that I wanted and then figure out what hashtags they were using and then search their hashtags. And it was a much bigger project than I ever anticipated, but it yielded some very rewarding results. And so I encourage you to experiment with this for your own show. If you are on Instagram, if your audience is on Instagram, do a little hashtag research. See what comes up when you use those broad hashtags like the broad category of travel or podcasting or entrepreneur. And then see how specific you can get with those hashtags. What are the qualifiers that you can put in there that gives you smaller, more specific, more diverse, more interesting, more outside of the box, even smaller, more niche accounts? And then see whose accounts you like. Follow a whole bunch of them. See which ones resonate with you, which ones align with your values, and then see who they're following and who's following them. And then see what hashtags they're using and research those hashtags. Yeah, this can be like a whole day or a whole week or a whole month project, but I think it will lead you to some fascinating insights, and new ideas. And if you want to hear more specifically about my experience and what happened with that, don't forget to subscribe to Craft and Culture over at thecreativeimposter.com/craft and culture. But for you, I would just experiment with what are those hashtags that the people in the community that you want to build and that you want to create are using. Find some people that you like, see what hashtags they're using, search those hashtags and see who you can find. And if you take anything and put podcast, so creative podcaster, multipotentialite podcast, put podcast in those hashtags and just see what comes up. Find some shows and see how they're building their audience or what kind of content they're putting out.
Okay.
And it'll be just an experiment to see what works for you, what people resonate with.
That sounds like fun.
And then you can kind of have a strategy going into your show because, and this is why I want you to do all this before you actually start. I don't want you to spend a year researching multipotentialite podcasts on Instagram. I don't want you to wait that long.
Okay, good.
But the reason why I want you to do a little bit is because once you get started, it can feel like a lot of work, especially in the beginning. And it can feel like you're not growing. You'll get like your first 100 listens, your first 500 listens. You'll be like, this is great. And then your numbers will stay the same for a little while. And you'll be like, oh, why am I doing this? Every episode I say to leave a review for my podcast and no one ever leaves a review. Every episode I say, follow me on Instagram and my Instagram isn't growing. Every episode I say, send me an email. Nobody ever emails me. And these things will start to happen, but it'll take time. Like part of it is that when people are listening to podcasts, they're usually doing something else. So if I say, email me, they're not always like in a place or a mindset where it's the right moment right then. And then they just forget.
Yeah, that totally resonates because I'm usually cooking dinner or doing dishes or driving. And I'm like, well, I can't email you. Like, I can't leave a review right now. And so I forget and it doesn't happen. Yeah. Okay.
If you do this research ahead of time and if you have this strategy of, okay, for every episode, it's not just about creating the episode and then posting one time on social media that the episode exists and then crossing my fingers. It's like, once I have this episode, how many different ways can I be creative with it? For example, I have the episode and then I create a blog post on my website that goes with the episode. Whether or not you use a transcript is sort of up to you. I find transcripts to be very daunting. I do transcribe my episodes, but it's just an automatic transcription. So I wouldn't be able to post it without doing some serious editing.
Right.
Which maybe for you, you enjoy that kind of thing. I do not.
I actually do, yeah. Okay.
But I use that transcript to, well, I used to write my own blog posts. Now I have somebody that I hire to write my blog posts for me. Secret. That's not actually me, even though she's writing as me. She knows my voice very well. But a short blog post, 300 to 500 words. The other thing, the transcript, and here's a tool for you to look up. Okay. It's a software called Descript. And Descript is a service that will take your episodes, you put the audio file in, it transcribes it, and then from there, you can actually edit your episode from the transcript. I don't know if you've ever worked with audio editing software before.
Not much.
So Descript's interesting because you can see the waveform of the audio, which is what you would normally use to edit, but it also gives you a Word document with text. And you can actually highlight text and click delete and it disappears from your audio.
Okay. Oh, wow.
You can copy and paste and move stuff around, right? This is going to blow your mind. Quick caveat, I am not 100% ready to say that Descript is a total replacement for a traditional DAW. DAW stands for Digital Audio Workstation, otherwise known as audio editing software like Adobe Audition, Hindenburg, Pro Tools, etc. However, it is getting closer and closer, and it is a great solution for a DIY podcaster to get started and not get bogged down in the software learning curve. And it makes it easier to create those audio clips because now as I'm looking at it, I can highlight a piece of text and say, this will make a great quote. Or this will make a great 30-second audio soundbite that I can use. And then you can export that transcript with time code stamps in it. So you can easily find those bits of audio to repurpose them. So I have the podcast itself, the blog post. Then I will make a still graphic that has like the episode number and URL. If there's a guest, the guest's photo and the title of the episode. Then I have a quote from the episode attributed to the guest, or if it's a solo episode, attributed to me. These graphic images I'm talking about, I create in an online software called Canva. Of course, I will be linking to Canva, Descript, and all of these other tools that I'm mentioning in the show notes for this episode at thecreativeimposter.com/pod NV071. And then I have a video. Well, it's technically a video. It's called an audiogram. Have you heard this word before?
Yeah.
So the audiogram is something that's kind of new-ish. And there's a piece of software called Headliner. Headliner lets you clip a little piece of your audio, upload an image, and then put like a little graphic animation that looks like a little sound wave. You can have it pop up with transcript, like subtitles if you want. That, to me, that's too much work. But I have clients who like it. And if you get very fancy, I'm using their free account, but if you want to pay for their premium account, they have stock video that you can have like actual video images playing during your sound clip. They have statistics that it causes people to at least hesitate over your post rather than just like quickly scrolling by it.
Yeah, it does. I was wondering how people made those too. Okay, thank you. That's great.
Yeah. And so then that way the podcast gives you all these other like fun content things. And then you just experiment and see what works for your audience. What do people engage with? What do people respond to? And, you know, you had even said, I think on one of your Instagram posts, you had said something about really researching your audience. Can you say more about that?
Yeah. Well, it was exactly what you're describing. You're finding people who, well, I'm finding people who are in the businesses that I want to attract. And then, I dig deep and I find, okay, women business owners who do this and like spiritual business owners. And I like to work with a lot of coaches. And so, you start going through the Instagram feed and the ones that you want, you start following them and you start using their hashtags. Yeah. Yeah. And you pay attention to what they're doing and what they're listening to, what they're reading, what they're watching, all that good stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Just looking at all the different ways that you can have fun with that content and the podcast just being part of that. And then there are some tips and tricks for how to make your podcast as discoverable as possible for people. And that's the other thing is that even though you're a huge podcast fan and you love listening to them, you know how to listen to them, you know where to find them, there's still a huge potential audience for your show that doesn't even listen to podcasts yet. And a lot of times we forget because we listen to them and it's become second nature to us. We forget and we only market to the people who already listen and already know how to listen. So in your strategy, thinking about the people who you want to listen, who don't already listen, how are you reaching out to them and how are you making it easy? For example, in your Instagram, I'm trying to remember, do you have a link that then branches out to other links, like a link tree or something like that?
Exactly.
Pro tip, and this one took me a little while. If Instagram is a place where you want to be spending some time to grow your show audience, I would highly encourage you to create a separate business profile on Instagram specifically for your podcast. There's a number of reasons for this, not least of which is that it makes it easier for other people to tag your show if they can find the name of your show on Instagram, rather than remembering the name of your business attached to your show or your name attached to your show or how to spell it. Also, using something like Linktree to create multiple links on a menu that people can choose from with that one link that's in your profile. I did not use a third-party service. I actually created an Instagram page on my website. It's not like something you'll find if you go to my website, but is a specific page that I link to from my Instagram profile that has a menu of various calls to action that I like to use at various times, like listen to Podcast Envy, or listen to The Creative Imposter, or sign up for office hours. So you can get to all of those calls to action and ways to engage with me and my content from that one link in the Instagram profile. And this is key if you are trying to help people who are not already podcast listeners discover, listen to, and fall in love with your show. Right now in this moment, I'm getting an idea. I am going to be creating an article over on Craft and Culture featuring some podcasters on Instagram who I think are using this link in bio technique very effectively. And I'm going to make that article free for everyone, whether you have paid to join the membership or not. So head on over to thecreativeimposter.com/craft and culture. I know I've said it a lot, and that's because I really want you. There is so much good stuff for you. And you can get that list of podcasters who are on Instagram using this technique well to check out totally free. No need to join. Do it now. And then even beyond that, thinking about how you might have people who follow you on social who never, ever listen to your actual podcast. They never subscribe. They never download it, but they're consuming the content that you're creating from the podcast on social.
Okay.
So people will say like, how come I can't get my Instagram followers to listen to my podcast? But does it matter? If they're still following you and they're engaging with you on your content, even if they never leave the Instagram platform, you're still like giving them that content and you're still building that relationship with them. So they're still part of your audience, even if they're not reflected in your podcast download numbers.
Oh, that's great.
And so just having this like broader perspective of your collective audience and how you can use that content that's fun for you to create for them.
That's great. Yeah, I've never thought of that perspective, but that makes a lot of sense. If you're just trying to reach people, does it matter where they're getting your content as long as you have multiple options for whatever people want to do or whatever abilities they have? That's great. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So hopefully this has given you some ideas.
So many ideas. Yeah.
Hopefully it's not overwhelming, the possibilities of what you can do to grow that audience.
No, it's not right now. You've really set my mind at ease, I guess. Yeah. So I really appreciate it.
And, you know, I also go back to this really simple advice. When I started, I was feeling a little bit down because I would see people post about their magnificent numbers and I had nowhere near that. And I still don't have huge numbers for my shows. But my partner said to me one time, because in the very beginning, I was like, there's only like 100 downloads for each episode. That feels really small. And he was like, if you had 100 people in the room physically in front of you listening to what you had to say, that wouldn't feel small.
That's true. Yeah, that's so smart.
Yeah. Let's be real about what those numbers actually signify. It's just when you start comparing it that you feel like it's not good enough. But if somebody's like, I launched a month ago and I only have 50 people, is that a good number? It's great. That's awesome. You have anybody listening to what you have to say.
They're inviting you into their lives. 50 people. That's not bad. 100 people.
They chose to spend 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 45 minutes, an hour listening to you.
Yeah.
And that's pretty awesome.
I love it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Okay. That's good.
Any other questions that are bearing on your mind or anything that I can clarify for you?
No, you covered so much more than I really even expected. So I'm so appreciative. Yeah. The encouragement with the audience was great. Thank you. Perfect.
Awesome. So what do you think is your next step on your podcasting journey?
Oh gosh. I guess I need to think about what I'm going to talk about. Make a list of some episodes. I was listening to one of your episodes last night and you're like, make a list. Can you make a list of 15, 20, 30 episodes? If you can, start. Yeah. So that's my next step. Yeah.
And actually, since our conversation, Kristen has begun her hashtag research and topic gathering phase. She told me that she has a list of about 24 topic ideas and is currently making outlines for the first few episodes. Hooray for solid pre-production! This is one of those steps that is going to help her get past that 7 or 8 episode hump that causes so many podcasters to pod fade. It's not going to happen to Kristen because she's doing the work. Kristen hopes to be recording episodes by mid-September 2020, and I hope to be listening to and sharing her show with you later this fall. No pressure, Kristen. Don't forget to check the show notes for links, resources, and behind-the-scenes access to craft and culture, plus the magic link to apply for your very own office hours session with me. Podcast Envy is produced by your podcast boss, Andrea Klunder. That's me. The Podcast Envy theme music is by Valentin Sosnitsky, courtesy of the Free Sound Project at freesound.org, and our podcast Angel music is by Benjamin Mastropolito, also on freesound.org as Lemon Cream. All music is licensed under the Creative Commons. Our episodes are mixed by Edwin Ruiz, and hey, if you want your show to sound as good as ours, hire us. Put the magic audio mojo of the Creative Imposter Studios to work for you. Thanks so much for listening, and here's to making your podcast the envy of everyone else.